commercialization, revenue growth is a problem for startups, right? But what is the problem which corporates face? So once you address it from a corporate perspective, because corporates are also struggling to innovate, most chief executives of large enterprises would say that how do they ensure the survivability and sustainability.
Hi guys, welcome to the Being Yourself show, where we talk to the people who have followed their passion to achieve great success. My guest today is Vishal Gupta, who is an ex-investment banker turned businessman. More about Vishal in the video. In the first half of the interview, I will be talking to him about his motivation for leaving a high-paying investment banking job to start something from scratch. In the second half, I will be learning some of the key skills that are required to be successful but are not taught in the schools. So if you get any value from this interview, then please do consider subscribing to my channel by tapping on the subscribe button and hitting the bell icon so that you get notification for all my future videos. So for now, enjoy the show. Hi guys, welcome to the Being Yourself show. Today my guest is somebody who has been a very successful investment banker. He has worked with the names like JP Morgan, ABN AMRO and Lloyds Bank. He's worked on more than $100 billion worth of transactions. And then all of a sudden he decided to leave that lucrative career and started his own venture. He's been working and connecting the investors to the inventors throughout the world. He has also been a keynote speaker, presenter, and a serial entrepreneur. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vishal Gupta.
Yeah, thank you, Ajay.
Vishal, first of all, thank you very much for coming in. My first question is, why did you leave such a great career that people die to get into and started your own? What was the motivation behind?
Yeah, so it wasn't sudden. I had great career in investment banking, as you said. But I think what is happening across industries, if you look at it, the lifespan of industries, the time the growth industries go through a growth phase, they reach maturity and decline. And I think investment banking in general went through that spurt of growth in the late 90s or early 2000s and then reached a pinnacle. And then we all know with the financial crisis, which unfolded in 2007, 2008. And from there on, I wouldn't say the industry has gone into decline, but it's kind of readjusted. And I think 2008, post the financial crisis, it was very clear that the industry will go through a structural adjustment. And I had been fortunate working in the city, and a lot of people used to say that what will happen to the future of London, future of the city, with the financial services in this turmoil. And I said, no, it will reinvent because a new sector would take over. And that was the beginnings, really, if you go to see with this tech and startup ecosystem coming up. So that came over. I eventually continued in the investment banking space until 2012, 2013. And that's when one realized that structurally the industry is going through a change, and growth is happening in other areas or in other forms, and that is what made me look and consider options in other areas.
And then you started in 2013, you left the job. You started in another venture, and then in 2016 you launched a company called Kabeela.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, you are actually managing the transactions worth more than $100 million. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So it was an evolution once you leave the umbrella of a large corporate. So it was, I did some exploration in terms of what is needed. I had the fortunate of I was fortunate being in London, going to a lot of networking events, which I naturally like to do, network and meet with people, understand what they're doing. And that was the stage, as I mentioned, when the tech and startup or fintech ecosystem in London was taking off. In the meantime, we were working on a few private investment opportunities with some of the clients and with a few of my former colleagues, which we knew. And then gradually, I got more and more immersed into the tech and venture capital ecosystem in London, and that's what eventually has led me to found my current venture, which is Kabeela, which we started in 2016.
What's up with the name?
Yeah. So Kabeela means tribe. So we are an innovation network. Uh, the the thinking behind it was that innovation today is global. It's beyond boundaries. So that's what we wanted to create with Kabeela, a very community-led, community-based platform. Also, as with the tribe, different members of the community have different skills or things which they can barter, and that is also something which is there as part of this Kabeela or tribe. That it's a connected platform. You could be creating innovation as a tech startup. You could be providing access to capital as an investor, or you could be providing access to markets as a large corporate. And it is how we bring together these various constituencies from different parts of that ecosystem, and create a cohesive community where each person has something different to contribute. So it's a give and take kind of relationship which exists, and within that, that's how we operate various programs under the banner of what we say as a strapline, connecting innovation with enterprise and capital. It's a very ecosystem community led approach where we try to create value for stakeholders across the ecosystem.
And there have been some events that we see in and around London, wherein these startups and the people who want to raise more money come to the events and meet the people who have money. I think in your case, as you just said, that you have the third part, which is allowing people to explore different areas, like different geographies, for example. Is that the only differential advantage into your events, or there is something more which is different to why we should look at yours versus what is going on?
Yeah. Yeah, so for us, the events or conferences which we do is one form of creating engagement. So what we are really operating is programs for commercialization or investment in innovation, wherein startups or scale-ups can become part of the program and find ways of taking their innovation to market or raising capital to fund their innovation or growth. Corporates who are looking to get access to innovation can come into this program and get access to innovative startups from different parts of the world and act as either customers or channel partners or co-creators with these entrepreneurs. And then investors can come in and get access to a new asset class of investment. So what the events serve to do is they kind of, in a face-to-face manner, get that network effect growing, because what we've also found is that people are very good in terms of their first degree networks, and a lot of people have similar. So you'll find if you're a startup, you will naturally gravitate around a lot of different startups around your area. If you're running a venture capital fund, you'll network with a lot of other people who are working in the VC industry. So our role really is to bring these different networks together. So we like to say that we are a network of networks. So we are connecting disparate networks, because that's when those creative intersections and collisions happen, and that's where you have opportunities for commercial partnership, where people can actually look at exploring mutual business opportunities together. So that's what we do in terms of curating both the programs which we do and then the events which form, or the conferences which form part of this. It's really the curation aspect of it, that how do we get the right mix of people in the room who each have something to give, something to take, as I mentioned. And with the global connections bit, which has been a key theme to across all of a number of activities which we do as well, also to open people's horizons to what are the opportunities beyond the immediate.
Yeah, I think, and that network of network thing, that makes a lot of sense. And moreover, when you go to these kind of events, I've been myself to few, and there is a certain buzz that gives you more ideas, even though you're not looking for them, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, what, in your opinion, like you have been running this kind of events for last seven years, right? What are the first top 3 challenges, if you want to call it, for the startups and the scale-ups in order to grow from where they are right now?
Yeah. I mean, so when we first started doing events, and that was something organically, we didn't think about, like, oh, let's do an event. It was something we just came, let's get people together and see what happens. But and then obviously there are a number of events which happen. So what we try to do is create a curated experience. So we recently hosted the India Innovation Day 2 weeks ago, and where so we try to create a comprehensive networking experience for different people who come together. So you have panel sessions, you have unstructured networking, but we also have structured networking. So for example, as part of this conference, we pre-scheduled 150 plus one-to-one meetings which took place on the day with 30 plus participating corporates, investment funds, and trade agencies. So the startups and the scale-ups had the opportunity to meet them, and some of these would fructify into tangible business or investment outcomes. So when you come to a conference like this, it is giving you networking values. You listen, of course, to top class speakers. You get some ideas flowing, and then you network informally to get those creative intersections again. So I think that's, to answer your question, that's what we seek to do with these conferences. To answer your other question in terms of the challenges which are facing startups and scale-ups, I think they have been well addressed, well identified, well articulated in terms of access. All startups and scale-ups go through access to capital, access to markets, access to resources. So all that we address, but again, the approach which we have taken with the programs, apart from the conferences, so we operate two other programs, which is, one is the Global FinTech Innovation Lab, and the second is what we call the Crossover Innovation program. So we've taken more of an ecosystem-based approach to this, and in addition to looking at how we support the startups and scale-ups in addressing their pain points, we also create the pull factor in bringing in the corporate innovation and the venture capital ecosystem, and looking at things from their perspective, that how do you create that pull factor, how do you address the problems from their perspective. Because on the other hand, you speak to VC funds, the VC venture capital industry is also going through its own growth pangs, where the ones which are up and running, they would say that there is plentiful capital available, but then there are new venture funds which are being set up. So how do we support that? How do they access capital? How do they access deal flow? How do they support their portfolio companies? So you also look at pain points from the perspective of the venture funds. You look at pain points from the commercialization. Revenue growth is a problem for startups, right? But what is the problem which corporates face? So once you address it from a corporate perspective, because corporates are also struggling to innovate. Most chief executives of large enterprises would say that how do they ensure the survivability and sustainability, right? So how do you get them to engage in a meaningful manner with the startup ecosystem around open innovation, enable them to embrace innovation and some of those would have transformational outcomes for the business. So the approach here is to look at it holistically, that not focus on startup scale-ups, but once you take a more ecosystem-based approach, then you can create a functional ecosystem.
Yeah, it's just kind of not just treating the symptoms, you trying to understand the bigger picture and then address the issues. That makes a lot of sense. So what are your focus areas now in the near future with your three different segments of the events in the business?
Yeah. So one with the programs which we are operating. So the India UK Tech Bridge program, which we operate, is the India UK crossover program, that we've expanded in focus to be more globally orientated, giving access to those startups or scale-ups from India or UK to more global market opportunities, and also helping both global startups, investors, and corporates to tap into innovation which is happening into these markets. We have expanded the program to 50 companies, which we call the Crossover 50, which we did a pre-release of it as part of the India Innovation Day 2 weeks ago, with 25 fantastic startups or scale-ups represented as part of that. We are running on the corporate side of things, as I mentioned, to create the pull factor. We're running 10 innovation challenges with across 50 plus enterprise partners, and what those innovation challenges enable us to do is identify real problem statements and use cases, because that's when we create commercial opportunities and generate engagement from both the corporate side and the startup side. So what we are acting here is creating commercial opportunities by, on one hand, looking at problem statements from the market, from large enterprises, and then on the other side, looking at solutions or solutions to those use cases which startups or entrepreneurs may be working on. So we're running those 10 innovation challenges, and we're looking for more industry partners to come in and partner with these innovation challenges or define innovation challenges. And then on the investment side of things, we are looking at what we say, building a collaborated pool of $100 million to invest in this ecosystem.
So which is the top 3, or let's say top 5 industries that are getting a lot of traction nowadays?
Yeah, so fintech, as has been made out or well written, is that everybody talks about fintech, but I think now we are going into this phase 2 of fintech, or phase 3 of fintech, which is where fintech is going global. And you look at a lot of niche local fintech players have come into being and challenged traditional BFSI players. On the same side, the traditional BFSI players have reinvented themselves and embraced fintech. So in that sense, there's the two coexisting together. But in terms of, if you look at where capital investment has gone in the last 6 to 12 to 18 months, is a lot of growth capital has gone into some of these scale-up fintech companies who are now looking at being global companies, potentially of the size of on an Amazon or a Google, whether they get to that scale, but they're talking about being large global leaders in fintech being created over the next 4 to 5 years, or some of the local leaders emerging into global leaders. So that's on the financial services or fintech side of things. But then of course across sectors, innovation is disrupting the consumer and enterprise. So industrial AI, or industry 4.0, or the fourth industrial revolution, as people refer to. So there's a lot of innovation being already embraced in those areas. So in some respects, it's technology or innovation is not limited to any sector, whichever industry, or whether it's a small business, large business, or you're a consumer, somehow we are all impacted with changes in technology and innovation.
That brings me to my next question, which is about the top tech trends that you think are going to be hot in 2020.
Yeah. Well, look, there's always hot trends, and technologies go through hype cycles, whether it's AI or blockchain. I mean, our approach has been, we tend to look at things less from a technology-led perspective. We tend to look at things more from the end commercial applications and how that technology is applied. So in that sense, we tend to be agnostic to what type of technology it is. I'm sure there are certain areas in technology which will get more momentum and have a greater impact than others. But just the way we operate, our focus is looking at the ultimate commercial applications of that, and to us, we are slightly agnostic in terms of what that core technology is. We're more interested in terms of how the delivery of services, the creation of the product, or the functioning of the enterprise is getting impacted, and we would look at technology as being an enabler to bring that about.
Okay, so that's a great insight about the market and industry. There's one more focus that we have on this channel, and which is about the education. And I wanted to start by asking you, tell us more about where did you get your education, what have you done, and where did you study, etc.
Yeah, so I grew up in India, and I did my education in India, and I was lucky to go into two of the creme de la creme universities in India. So I did a bachelor's in technology from the Indian Institute of Technology, IIT in Kanpur, and I did my master's in business administration, MBA, from the Indian Institute of Management, IIM in Ahmedabad.
My second question is about the impact that you have even before you got into your college, right? So when you were a teenager or maybe even less than 10 years old, was there something that you learned while you were growing up which had a huge impact onto your career or onto your personal life?
I was, in India at a growing stage, there is a lot of emphasis on academics and education. It forms a vital part of your growing up years. I was, I don't know, fortunate or whatever, but supposedly, doing well in terms of the Indian education system. Uh, uh, but I think what the memory I do have is that I had this willingness to challenge a little bit of rebellious tendency, you can say, to explore what's outside. Mm-hmm. So even though back in the day there wasn't so much emphasis on sports and other activities, so I used to be an active cricketer in my school days. I used to play at the university level, and get involved in other activities, and I had a curiosity to explore things outside the immediate again. So again, connecting the dots backwards, you can say that somehow in my role when I made the shift, which might have been when I did it, appeared to be slightly unconventional, leaving a mainstream corporate career job and moving to entrepreneurship. But I had this, maybe perhaps looking back, even from my earlier days, I had this, tendency or proclivity to explore what's outside and maybe look at things maybe outside my comfort zone and see what's happening there.
So now this brings me to a very hypothetical question. How much credit do you give of your success to the education that you have received? So let's say if you would have not gone to the places where you have for your studies, would you be at the same place where you are, or it would be different?
Yeah, so there's a lot of debate these days about whether the educational system is functioning, not functioning, what should it be, what should it not be. Perhaps there is no one fixed answer. I can break it down in terms of one, education has a learning value. Second, it serves as a launch pad to career opportunities. So for me, yes, it served as a launch pad to career opportunities. How much of that learning one is directly utilizing, I can't say. But the one thing which I would point out, apart from perhaps not about my personal experience, just but as an observation, in terms of perhaps one observation I have is in terms of the selection process for the education, and you mentioned about how difficult it is to get into this. And I think one of the things which we are doing with the selection process is paying a lot of emphasis on ability and perhaps not so much on interest. Okay, so I recently met somebody in Delhi who is a very successful fashion designer and set up a fashion label. And she said back in the day she could not get entrance into any of the fashion institutes in India, right? So what did she do? So she learned on her own because she had the persistence and the passion to really do it, and she's made it through. But that's the one story we hear. There might be 100 others who could also have done it, but because they were judged on some kind of metric of ability, but not necessarily of interest, who did not get that opportunity. So that's the one thing which I would say, if we can somehow figure out a mechanism of also ensuring that your intake into some of these high quality universities is also based on people's interest to really pursue careers in that domain, I think then we will create a bigger impact.
What are the top skills that are required in order to be successful, but the education wherever you have studies has completely missed out on them?
I think everybody has their strong points and weak points. Uh, so, and I think we've got to adjust with that. So these days there is an era of continuous learning. That's why you have these online courses or MOOCs, etc., which is in terms of upskilling yourself in terms of functional skills, which is as I going back to where we started, that we're going in a phase where industries are lifespan of industries is shrinking. So through our working career, we have to reinvent ourselves 2 or 3 times. So we can either upskill ourselves functionally, but also there is, as is well made out, there are other, soft skills aspect of it, dealing with different people. Uh, the the communication skills, managing across cultures, uh, uh, that's a skill which one needs to develop. And I think also it's about, particularly as an entrepreneur, you got to develop a lot of persistence to deal with, because entrepreneurship is hard. It's working in, even though there's no job security or job certainty even in large corporates or any type of corporate jobs, but you have some sort of security net. A lot of things in your life are taken care of when you're operating independently or start to operate independently. And even after you get to a certain stage, you have to deal with a lot of pressures yourself. So, and I think that's one of the things uh, to bear in mind. And I think that's where a lot of, now fortunately, a lot of people have been coming out and talking about the mental health aspects of it, both on the corporate side of the corporate side of things. It's been talked about for a while, but also I think in the startup or venture space, people are understanding that how it is even more important. So I think as a life skill, that's something which is vitally important.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that, because I read somewhere that the current education system that we had was actually um, prepared in the industrial era, and the skills that have been taught are still have not evolved as much as we have evolved as humans. The kind of advancement that we have seen in technology and the skills that you've said, the persistence and also the networking, for example, and nobody teaches you how to dream big, how to rise up after the failure, and those are the kind of things that are key right now in order to survive and grow. And I think that's one thing that I also personally believe that should be included in some way or form into how we teach the children. And let me ask you about the long-term goals that you have going forward.
So with at the moment we're very focused on, or I'm very focused on building Kabeela, or building the global innovation tribe. We think there's a lot of work to be done there in terms of supporting the overall global innovation ecosystem. I think still some of the constructs which are there in terms of, goes back to the problems which we discussed, from whether from a startup perspective, the fund industry perspective, uh, or the corporate perspective. I think all those things, we haven't reached a stage where we have a steady state solution. We are still at a stage where we are utilizing old world constructs in the innovation ecosystem. So I think that's where at least I've committed the next 10, 20 years of my life to see, or being able to play a role, or whatever small role we can, in terms of being a facilitator for that innovation ecosystem, be it in terms of enabling startups to scale and become global companies, uh, whether it is helping larger enterprises to partner with these startups and bring innovation into the way they're functioning or delivering their services and products, or supporting the flow of capital into the innovation ecosystem from an investor perspective. Uh, so I think that's where, 10 or 15 years down the line, that's what I'd like to see, is to have played a role in that.
And tell our viewers if they want to reach you, because you have a lot of good stuff. You have a lot of new startups that come and meet under that one roof, and you have a lot of people who have come with a lot of money. So there might be a lot of people who are interested in what is going on and when is your next event, and how we can reach you, really.
Yeah, LinkedIn is one place where you can find me and add me and reach out, where I try to respond to most people who connect with me, and or if anybody wants to engage with any of our programs, you can go to our website, which is Kabeela.life, and you'll find different ways in which you can engage with various programs, or you can participate in one of our future conferences, um, and that's a way of finding out what we are doing and meeting a few others in the ecosystem as well. So those are the ways you can reach out to me.
Thank you very much for that, Vishal. And guys, if you want to raise some funding, or if you have some idea, then get in touch with this guy. He has been in touch with a lot of venture capitalists, a lot of angel investors, and a lot of inventors. And Kabeela.life is your website, as you said, which is Kabeela. That is Kabeela.life, as in life is beautiful. Thank you, Vishal. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And bye, everyone. I will see you again next week. Till then, be yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, Ajay.